So, time then for the press preview. It's our first look at what is on the front pages of tomorrow's papers. And tonight we'll be checking out the headlines with the journalist and author Rachel Shabi and leader writer at the Daily Telegraph, Tim Stanley. Great to see you both. We'll chat in a moment after we've had a look at some of those front pages, beginning with the Observer, which leads with the leadership struggle across the Conservative Party, with the headline, Bitter Johnson trying to wreck Sunak's bid to replace him. The Sunday Express reports on the new battle to save Brexit as Jacob Rees-Mogg worries over who may be the next Prime Minister. The Sunday Telegraph says tax cuts are at the heart of Sajid Javid and Jeremy Hunt's campaign bids for Downing Street. Conservatives have warned the party is ripping itself apart and have called for an end to the toxic briefing against Rishi Sunak. That's the headline in the Sunday Times. The Sunday Mirror says the Labour leader Keir Starmer has accused Boris Johnson of squatting in Downing Street while members of his party jostle to replace him. And just to remind you, you can scan the QR code that you see on screen during the programme and you can have a look at the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you're watching us discussing them. And to discuss them, I'm joined once again by Rachel Shabi and Tim Stanley. Very good to see you both this evening. And so much to talk about, a lot to pick our way through. Breaking news this evening, Sajid Javid and Jeremy Hunt both declaring their hand. And Tim, they've both done individual interviews for the Sunday Telegraph, and both interviews make very interesting reading, but they're both singing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to taxation.
They're off, and if you would like a plug, if you don't mind a little plug here, I think the Telegraph is going to be the newspaper in which the leadership candidates are going to lay out their views in the coming weeks. So we're going to be an absolute must read. The background to Javid and Hunt's leadership campaigns, of course, is Rishi Sunak, who yesterday said that he didn't want to plough ahead with grand tax cuts because he didn't think the economy was ready for it, which is a bold and brave pitch. It's a little like entering a beauty pageant wearing a balaclava. Well, Hunt and Javid have spied an opportunity there, because I suspect this contest is going to be very much a contest with a tax and economic policy. They both spied an opportunity to announce their candidacies and put at the centre of them very, very bold and radical tax cuts. In the case of Sajid Javid, there are so many of them, I had to write them down. He's going to scrap the national insurance tax rise. He's going to ditch the planned corporation tax increase. He's going to bring forward the income tax cut to next year, and there'll be a temporary fuel duty cut as well. And what Jeremy Hunt wants to do, the two headline tax cuts he's running with, are first of all a 5-year holiday on business rates, and secondly, he wants to cut corporation tax down to 15%. There are actually a number of candidates that are suggesting that latter one, including Sajid Javid. So that looks like it's going to be where a lot of candidates are going to end up settling. If they did that, it would mean that Britain would have the joint lowest corporation tax within the G20. So it would be quite a game changer on tax. Other candidates have announced as well today, Grant Shapps, Nadeem Zahawi. We have comment pieces and words from them as well. They've chosen to place an emphasis upon defence spending. Obviously, Ukraine's at the top of their minds. But I predicted for some time now that I think the big issue in this election will be tax, because the national insurance tax increase under Rishi Sunak was so controversial. And it doesn't surprise me Javid and Hunt have gone straight for it. Yeah, well, on that point, Rachel, it's interesting, isn't it, that Sajid Javid has said he wants to reverse the rise in national insurance to fund NHS backlogs, fund social care reform as well. He's saying that in the Sunday Telegraph, and yet he didn't seem to complain about it when he was Health Secretary.
Well, yeah, but I think that speaks to a lot of things that Conservative cabinet members didn't speak out about while they were in Boris Johnson's cabinet, and then suddenly, conveniently, were hand-wringing with, a newfound moral compass over the last few days. So I think that speaks to that. But let's just put this into context. Britain's corporation tax is currently 19%. It is the lowest of European OECD countries. Germany has 29%, France has 28%, Spain has 25%. Those are all figures from the Tax Foundation. The reason that these Conservative contenders want to lower it to such alarmingly, dangerously low levels is because Boris Johnson's Conservatives are now fashioned in his name. They are a hard right ideological party. They believe in achingly low taxes. They are essentially a money delivering mechanism for the rich. The Conservatives have been in power for 12 years. In those 12 years, Britain has had wage stagnation. We've got increasing number of people living using food banks. We've got increasing number of people plunged into poverty, including children, including homes where there's at least one parent working. Those two things, Conservatives in power and Britain in eye-watering levels of poverty and hardship, are related. They're not disconnected facts. And now we can see that these Conservative contenders for leadership want to really cement all of this economic hardship that they've inflicted on the population. That's what the contenders are promoting, because that's what the party is. That's what the membership is. That's what the MPs are. That's what the Tory donors are. And they are the ones who decide our future.
Yeah, I want Tim to come back on that, because I know you've got something to say, but I also want us to move on to the front of the Observer as well. So a quick word on that, Tim, and then I'll ask you about the Observer.
Sure. First of all, in his interview with us, Sajid Javid answers your point, Jonathan, about why, when he was Health Secretary, he was happy to see the tax increases. His explanation is, I was in charge of health, so I wanted money for health. I wasn't Chancellor. It wasn't his job. And that's a fair enough answer. Ministers are not going to turn down money that's put into their departments. On the tax point, Kemi Badnock has also written a piece for us in which she explains the thinking behind tax cuts, which is that it's a supply-side argument. The lower you put taxes, the higher the revenue, because it generates growth, which could be shared for the people, and that can help raise their salaries, etc. And we have a poll which finds that 56% of Britons do favour tax cuts, and that's actually a higher percentage than Tory voters. 52% of Tory voters want tax cuts, but actually 56% of all Britons want tax cuts. So they're actually very popular. It's not just about the rich; it's about everyone.
Okay, I'm sorry to keep. I'm going to keep the pace up just because we are really short of time, and I want to. We're meant to be looking at the front pages, so I'm just going to talk to you about the Observer very quickly, Tim. This is pitching Rishi Sunak sort of as a bit of an outlier, isn't it? Because he is all about belt tightening, and the front of the Observer says not only is he an outlier in that sense, but also there is a lot of briefing from Number 10 against him, really, because he began the whole ball rolling with Boris Johnson's resignation.
Yes, the Observer suggests that Boris Johnson is very, very sore about the way that he went. He's sore about Rishi Sunak's resignation, and that they're going to try and make life as difficult as possible, not just for him, but for anyone who replaces him. The Observer points out that Boris Johnson has filled the cabinet with appointments. Some of them, people say, are even unnecessary jobs that didn't previously exist, like Deputy Leader of the Commons, and that he is doing it because he's making life difficult for the person who takes over, who will then have to sack many of these people and replace them. I'm sure Number 10 would reply to that by saying, hey, we've probably got a 2-month at least campaign ahead of us. We've got to have a functioning government. Therefore, it would be irresponsible to leave those positions vacant. But either way, there's no escaping that this campaign's going to be bitter. There are already charges flying around about tax and various other things. It's going to be a pretty ugly contest.
Yeah, and it's a similar theme, Rachel, on the front of the Sunday Times. Their headline, quite simply, Tories tear themselves apart over tax.
There's bad blood, isn't there? And there's going to be a lot of bloodletting, and it's being done on our time and at our expense. The Times is reporting pretty eye-watering details, including that, dossiers of incriminating evidence is being sent to Labour by various leadership candidates to be used against potential rivals in that race. So that's the depths to which they have sunk. But of course, that is all more. That is more proof of how, they just need to get on with this. But also, if Boris Johnson is being such a disruptive factor and force, why is he still Prime Minister? Why has he still got the power to do any of this? It's absurd. OK, and let's just finish very quickly on the Sunday Express. New battle to save Brexit, Tim.
Jacob Rees-Mogg warns that the people who have felt most validated in the last few days by events have been extreme Remainers, and he's worried that whoever takes over will attempt to chip away at Brexit. I don't know if I agree with Jacob on this one. I think that Brexit is now a consensus within the Conservative Party. And once the area of tax has been discussed and moved on from, I think they're going to move pretty sharpish onto Northern Ireland as well. Before the leadership contest even began, for example, Jeremy Hunt took a very hawkish line on Northern Ireland. I understand his concerns, and he's right to flag them. But even Keir Starmer now supports Brexit.
Yeah, quick thought on this, Rachel, before we go to the break.
I mean, there's always a betrayal narrative with Brexiteers, isn't there? That's just part of the DNA. But also, I suspect he's just trying to flush out the former Remainer candidates who all, of course, had to pledge loyalty to Brexit in order to still be standing in the party.
OK. All right, we'll leave it there for the moment. Plenty more still to come, including the Sunday Mirror with Keir. Bring on the general election. That's their headline. Discussing that and some of the other stories on the front pages when we come back. Welcome back. Part two of the press preview. Rachel and Tim still with us. Now, before the break, Rachel was asking the question, why is Boris Johnson still Prime Minister? Tim, the front of the Mirror, asking the same question. Keir, bring on the general election, accusing Boris Johnson of squatting in Downing Street.
I think the Tories would be mad to hold an election right now. It ain't going to happen, but I can understand why Sir Keir is rearing to go. It's going to be a very interesting change of the political scene, of course, when the new leader is selected. Keir Starmer has benefited from a contrast between his style, he places a great emphasis upon trust and integrity, and of course he's just been cleared by the Durham police, compared with Boris Johnson. Well, when Boris is gone and when Starmer is up against someone else, it's going to be a completely different dynamic. And the Tories are hoping, of course, momentum will go back to them.
Rachel, in the polls since Boris Johnson resigned, the party has lost on average 3 points, I believe. Labour up to 11 points ahead now. Do you think the Conservatives actually can turn it around?
Well, I have no idea. But what I do know is that, when Keir Starmer is on the front page of the Mirror, he's written for the Mirror, and he says changing the person at the top isn't going to clean out the rotten culture from throughout the party. Only by booting out the lot of them will Britain get the fresh start it needs. It's hard to argue with that. I mean, it's not just Boris Johnson, is it? This has been going on for years. We've had several Tory leaders foisted upon us, albeit Boris Johnson himself in an election. But it is mad. It just is objectively mad that our Prime Minister should be decided by, 200,000 Conservative members with really fundamentalist and bigoted views. An overwhelming majority of them believe that Islam is a threat to the way of life of the UK. Over 50% of them thought Trump was a great president. It's just nuts that the next PM should be decided by this lot. I mean, objectively.
Tim, fundamentalist and bigotist views?
I think the word objectively is carrying a great deal there. I don't know where those polls or those figures come from, but constitutionally it would be no different to if a Labour Prime Minister changed and was replaced by the Labour Party. And of course, the Labour Party, in its wisdom, chose Jeremy Corbyn as its leader. Leaders have not been foisted onto the British public. David Cameron was elected. Theresa May was elected. Boris Johnson was elected in a massive landslide. I think Labour's got to be very careful about being sanctimonious about any of this. When did the expenses scandal happen? Under Labour. When did the Iraq War happen? Under Labour. All politicians are tainted. All political parties are tainted by scandal. Yeah. I really do. I think it's unwise to try and take the moral high.
OK, and I just want to finish on one other story away from the politics. We'll talk more about all of this in half an hour, Rachel, don't worry. I just want to talk about the petrol crisis because the Times has quite an interesting story just about how difficult it is for people.
Are you asking me to respond?
Sorry, Rachel, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is there's a report from Worcester. The reporter is in Worcester, where an employer is reporting that increasingly people are now just having to walk to work because they cannot afford the spiralling cost of petrol. We're now at £100 tank for the average family, Obviously, that is just absurd. And this is the trouble, that all the time that the Tories are squabbling over their future leader, we're in this eye-watering cost of living crisis. Martin Lewis, the financial journalist, has been doing media rounds over the last few days, and the absolute urgency of his voice when he's warning about the horrendous economic hardships that are about to befall this country. Come October, for instance, he's talking about energy bills rising to over £3,000. He points out that the state pension on average is just under £10,000. It cannot be right that a third of a pension is going to go on just paying energy costs. That's completely unsustainable. And so, all of these things just need urgent attention today. And instead, we're having a Tory psychodrama again.